All right, the property prequel, be in the know before you buy. Crossman, how are you?
It's Rams, I'm well. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good, mate, good. Jason Pate, what an app that was.
Mate, that was awesome. I'd heard a lot about Jason, seen his work, of course, but never actually met him. What a great fella. He just was not what I expected. He was a real knockabout, like obviously a bit of a footy background, pretty similar to you and I in the sense of his upbringing, playing footy, sport, didn't love the study side of it, and away he goes.
And, mate, very, very similar in what we could do with a pad and a pen design as well.
It's exactly the same.
Mate, it's for anyone who hasn't seen Jason's work, check out Jason Pate Design with a J, Jayson, Pate Design. His portfolio at the moment, wild, and like some of the work he's doing on the Gold Coast, Southeast Queensland. He's one of the most in-demand designers in Australia at the moment. So check out his stuff. But his story, mate, unreal. I couldn't believe some of the stuff. He's a Bali Bomber survivor. He only went to TAFE. He built his business. He was on his own. Mate, really, really good story. So it was interesting as well when we had that chat with him. He actually he does a bit of projects on the side, and he actually sold. He was telling us not too long ago, and it's actually going to be one of our topics today. Is around. We're all around adding value to the buyers out there, but we thought we'd do a quick episode on what we're noticing with sellers and sellers coming to market and meeting the market as well, and how the timeframes are lagging, because we're hearing, and from the data I'm looking at, mate, anywhere from sort of 10 to 15, even up to 20% drops, depending on what sort of week or month you're selling in. So just thought we'd touch on that, because on the flip side, opportunity for buyers, right? So we're going to add value, I think, to sellers and buyers in this one. So it's an exciting one. But are you sort of hearing that across the ground as well, Crossy?
Definitely. Certainly in relation to the buyer inquiry almost falling off a cliff, particularly in the space that I operate in, which is a lot of the new projects in Southeast Queensland, some house and land stuff. Talking to Jason off camera last week, if we were sitting here talking and having the podcast with him 6 months ago, there's a lot of developers and or builders that, don't need to deal with external agents and things because they can just sell it themselves. Basically, they become order takers. People would inquire and say, yep, I'll take unit 404. What's the price? Yeah, this is the price, $1 million, bang, I'll take it. Whereas now they're having to look further afield in relation to different project marketer channels, different buyers agency groups, different channel partners to really keep their sales momentum going. So that side of it has really sort of fallen off a cliff. And I know from your point of view in your buyers agency business, your buyer inquiry is still strong because of the pipeline that you've built, but the demand for general buyers, I'd say mum and dad buyers going through open homes and things on weekends, has reduced dramatically. Would that be fair?
Yeah, for sure. I strongly agree with that. Definitely some segments of the market, prices easing somewhat as well. And one thing I am noticing as well is hearing out in the marketplace. Obviously, we do a lot of off-market deals in the buyer's agency world. In the off-market space, it's really cool because you get insight into, obviously, the seller's situation. Sometimes I've actually met the seller there as well. Sometimes there's no agent even involved, so it's actually just me and a vendor. Obviously, all I do is buying property, but we do get insight into the sales side as well through agents and vendors. And one thing I am noticing, some sellers out there are sitting on the fence in terms of should I sell now or should I not? Or, I'll dabble in the market and hope for a certain price and then see what happens. I'm really noticing the market at the moment, the sellers and buyers probably aren't aligned. So you just got to be mindful, and this is what this app's around, being mindful of meeting the market if you're a genuine seller.
Yep.
Because what I'm noticing is agents are doing a lot more vendor management. So what that means is they're really working hard to educate vendors. Hey, that price you wanted 3-6 months ago, the market's probably not there at the moment. So if you want to come to market, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, you're going to have to be realistic, and I'm going to have to give you a bit of evidence and test the market, but you're going to have to be willing to be educated with me as well. So what I've noticed, and some of our best buys as buyers agents have been the ones where sellers probably didn't meet the market to start with, sits on the market, gets stale,
Yep.
and they need to sell. And I know that due to my investigations.
Yep.
And we snag it at a good price. So yes, this app's all around adding value for buyers, and I can teach you some good things to snag some good deals. But I also want to provide value for any sellers out there and just say, hey, as a buyer's agent, I'm noticing it. You need to be able to meet the market. If you're a genuine seller, you need to be listening to your professional sales agent or understanding what the market's doing, because it doesn't take long. If you're a genuine seller, you miss the market, could be game over.
Totally. And so you're sitting there as a buyer's agent and predominantly representing buyers. So if I suppose, take a bit of a seller's hat, for example, now and just think about what's happening globally and what's happening in our economy at the moment. We've seen interest rate rise last month of 50 basis points. We've just seen a 75 basis point rise in the US. They've sort of just gone whack over there and trying to really stop inflation from increasing at the rate that it is. So if you're a seller now, you're looking ahead going, okay, we've got some headwinds. We've got a rising interest rate environment, some real negative sentiment. You only have to turn the TV on or pick up a newspaper and see the negative headlines, which, we can dive into. But if you're a seller thinking that I need to sell my home, I think you need to come to market sooner rather than later, because I see this getting worse before it gets better. So pricing your property now at the right price is so critical, because if you don't, your business is around helping buyers obviously get the property they want, but also get it at the best price. So if you're looking at it from the seller's point of view, they want to have an attractive property hitting the market at the right price, not at an inflated price that then sits on the market for 6 to 8 weeks, becomes stagnant. People perceive that there's something wrong with it, and then buyers agents like Matthew Srama come and swoop, and that's not being rude, but that's the reality of it. So the importance of a seller getting good advice from real estate agents, as in what's the right price, also what's the right strategy to sell. So
good point.
Is it
Great
auction?
Point.
Is it expression of interest? Is it promoting it with a price? I don't know. You're better to comment than me. So I think that's critical. And just wondering, mate, have you got any sort of thoughts around that? If you're a prospective seller at the moment, what's the best strategy to price your property at?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one. As a buyer's agent, obviously, I got relationships with a lot of sales agents, and all of them do different strategies, right? And I think it really depends on the dwelling type, the location, and the price point as well. Because one thing, if I was a seller, I'd be really choosing agents who are putting together a strategy based on the current market. Because gone are the days where just any property, auction, best price, done kind of thing. You need to be a bit more selective with what you're doing, an EOI, or is it offers over, or is it a set, or is it an auction still, the type of property. Different strategies, right? And if I was a seller, I'd be really, really educated around which agent's going to provide the best strategy, which agent do you get along with, who's going to give honest feedback, not just want to win your listing and then beat you down on price. It's around having honest conversations up front. And then probably my biggest tip as well is to agents out there is, I think to sellers, is you need to be educating them from the start and having upfront conversations around pricing properly. Because again, there's nothing more attractive for buyers. I feel that when a property loses traction, no bites on it, that's when we like to buy. So I'm giving some really good insight into, if you're a seller or an agent, you should be having those conversations early and pricing the property dependent on the market, because we're definitely seeing it. If you're not meeting the market's going to get away from you. Yeah,
big time. It's a difficult one if you're a seller, because if you do need to sell, and you're getting in 2, 3, 4 different real estate agents to come and do an appraisal for you, to do a listing presentation to say that, this person is the right person to sell our place. One saying auction, the other saying definitely put a price on it, the other saying, look, let's do expressions of interest. It must be really hard to know. But if you're an agent, you're also got this predicament where you want to be super honest with the Mr. and Mrs. vendor and tell them, look, the market has sort of probably decreased 10 to 20% over the last 8 weeks, and we think this is the best option for you. But by the same token, you still want to win the business because you don't get paid unless you list and sell that property. So it is difficult. But I guess my advice to anyone looking to sell soon is think about the opportunity cost.
Good point.
I'm a big believer in that. So if you're going to come to market now, and you're going to say you wanted to get a price of say $1.5 million, and say, well, I'm going to list it at 1.65, and I'm happy to negotiate down and end up landing at my 1.5. Well, you might sit on the market for 3 to 4 months. And what's the real price going to end up? What's your net price going to be if you're on the market that long, as opposed to listing it now at, say, you might list it at a price of, say, 1.485 or something, and list it really sharp and have it sold within 7 to 10 days. If you don't do that and you're still on the market in 3 to 4 months' time, interest rates might have gone up another 1%. At that point, we might have even less buyers in the market at that time. Your 1.5 that you wanted to get 3 to 4 months ago might now be 1.3.
Yeah.
And that 1.485 that you didn't want to sell for originally, now you'd be desperate to get it. So I think, in my sort of, 20 years of being in the game, I've seen it all. I've seen different cycles. I've seen certain properties do well, certain areas do well. Troy Dowker gave some great intel to us a few weeks ago about chasing the tail, which I know you're a big believer in. And at the moment, if you're a seller, you're probably chasing the tail downwards on the downward slide. So at what point do you choose to transact? I think it's a really interesting time at the moment.
It is. It really is. And a key takeaway there for the sellers is, assessing where the market's at, having them upfront conversations with the sales agents to know where your property sits in the market cycle, seeing where you're at as a scenario as well, as a family, individual, couple, whatever. Like, have you already bought elsewhere? Obviously, you have to sell, or do you need to wait? Or is having a look at the broader picture of where you're at right now, because definitely noticing it. If you're not meeting the market's going to get away. And like they say, if you do hit the market, one common thing I remember when I was a sales agent back in the day as well, and you would know this, is sometimes the first offer is your best offer, right?
Totally.
So it's gone are the days of being too greedy or those sorts of things. You just got to be realistic, pricing properly. Getting good advice is probably a big one on the sales side, because I see it hand in hand every day as a buyer's agent. The properties that might not have had that upfront conversation on price or whatnot, and it really affects the listing as a whole. So, mate, as we end the app, mate, what's I guess your biggest tip for where we are in the market now and adding value on the seller's side of things with the market?
Yeah, good lead in there. My biggest advice for the seller at the moment would be to think about your opportunity cost, but also think about what's the type of property that you're going to go and buy if you do sell your home now.
Point.
So is it like for like? I've got a fully renovated house and I'm going to go and buy a fully renovated house. So if you're buying in the same market and the same type of property, you mightn't be able to sell for the exact price that you want right now, but chances are you can go and negotiate pretty hard on your way back in, if that makes sense. So
great point.
Generally the gap will remain the same. If you've got a fully renovated house that, again, you're not going to get the exact price that you want, for example, but you're going to buy a home that needs a complete renovation, you can negotiate really hard, because those properties right now, they're not in high demand because of the issues in the building game that we do have. So my biggest advice to people would be, look at your opportunity cost, look at your absolute bottom line, think about if you don't sell now and you stay on the market too long, what does that really cost you?
Yeah, good point.
And
Love
then just do your numbers on that.
Yeah.
What about yourself, mate?
I think my biggest key takeaway out of this app and where the market's at is the sellers willing to absorb what's happening with the market. I think it's a big one with sellers at the moment who want to sell, but they're not willing to actually absorb what's happening. They still think it could be 6, 12, 18 months ago, and they're not agreeing with what the sales agent's telling them.
Just
and
got the blinkers on?
Got the blinkers on. I think my biggest key takeaway, again, I see it every day, every week with stale listings, things like that, the properties that aren't meeting the market, they're not going to sell, and they're potentially at risk at selling undervalued, and opportunist buyers for good buyers out there, or buyers agents who can snag it. So biggest tip is, if you are a seller and you're thinking of selling, Have those upfront conversations with a selling agent. Secondly, be willing to absorb whatever information gets spat back out there, you know?
Yeah, I think that's great. No, I think in my experience of late, a lot of people aren't doing that. And I think they're being caught weeks and months later by selling for a figure that they wouldn't have dreamed selling for prior. And because they get a bit of seller fatigue, don't they? They think, I'll never sell for this amount. But then they get to a point where they go, you know what, I'm just done with it.
Yep.
We'll just take that figure. And it's a lot lower than what they would have taken at the start. So, mate, I think great advice from both of us there today. It's a changing market. We're in changing times. We've been used to a booming property market here for the last couple of years. The underlying fundamentals for growth on the Gold Coast is still outstanding, but we've got some headwinds at the moment that we need to navigate our way through.
Definitely. And I really like seller fatigue.
Boom.
I'm stealing that and using that in my dialogue.
You're welcome.
100%. All right. Thanks, Crossy.
See you, mate.